Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, talking today about Alien. This film made in 1979. This was around the same time that Battle Beyond the Stars came out, and it too was kind of a reaction to Star Wars. Now, this distributed by 20th Century Fox, but as many people know, the original Star Wars was owned by George Lucas and later to be called Lucasfilm, and all Fox had was a distribution contract for it. So they wanted something of their own, and it created a franchise, although I seriously doubt that when they made this, that was what they were getting. This was only the second film by Ridley Scott, who later did some of the best science fiction out there, which includes Prometheus and, of course, Blade Runner. And a great cast with Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton. Most of these people went on to much bigger performances. Sigourney Weaver made almost a complete career of doing Alien sequels, although she did a pretty good job in a few other sci-fi kind of films. At any rate, we have Jerry Goldsmith did the score of this. We know him, of course, from other films which he was very well known for. So this is a very good operation. Although they mentioned in a couple of places where they used Mozart and then Howard Hanson, they really had music that was written by Jerry Goldsmith, but for some reason the classics just worked better, especially at the very end where they play Howard Hanson, which does have a very impactful ending for the film. Now, the part of John Hurt, who is the person who is attacked by the alien and then thinks he's all right, and then it bursts out of his chest, we'll talk about that in a second, was supposed to be played by an actor by the name of John Finch. Unfortunately, he came down with pneumonia, I believe, right before the shooting was to begin, and so at the last minute they had to pull in John Hurt. They had wanted him for a part in the show before, but he wasn't able to do it because of a conflict, and turns out after John Finch was hired for this, the conflict went away, so when Finch was not able to do it, John Hurt was brought in and actually played the same character in two movies. He was having that same alien escape happening to him also in Spaceballs, which he says before he dies, "Oh no, not again." Essentially what Alien is a horror movie. And what you do in a horror movie is, if you're doing it well, if you're doing it in the Hitchcock way, you don't show the monster. In the case of Hitchcock, he didn't do monsters really. But generally speaking, his idea was that what you don't show is what's scary. And by giving just a little hint of what you expect to see after that, it works. For instance, in The Birds, some of the birds were real, and there were enough of them that were real. You would think all the rest of them that they used in the film were real. Many of them were cardboard. But all you have to do is give that trick in order for the mind to take over and leave it to the imagination. In the imagination, you can come up with much scarier things than someone in a rubber suit. I should mention Veronica Cartwright here, also incredible in the main cast. Her sister, Angela Cartwright, and her have always worked from the time that they were children, and always have some kind of film that somebody wants them in. And in this case, she takes the point of the audience. That is to say, she's the one that's really scared. She's the one that has all of the right ideas. Let's just get out of here. And of course, to make a good horror movie, you have to be stupid. You have to say, okay, we have something that we don't know how big it is, and we don't know how terrible it is, and we know that we're all going to die. Let's split up. Take a flashlight. Speaking of lights, they used lights in this with such effect. much of what you see is in shadow or in partial light. You don't get a good view of the alien really until the very end. You don't get a good view of the inside of the ship really, except in a couple of places. And because of that, it allowed a certain amount of economy in building the sets. The sets were mostly made in the inside of the Nostromo were made of old airplane parts that they'd salvaged from a wrecking yard and repaint them, make it kind of greasy looking like you might find on an old freighter, and it makes it very believable. And then the way you light it is a way where you can't really tell how cobbled together it all is. And with that, it gives realism. Once again, you get a little taste of what you expect to see going forward. And so that works. From there to the instructions on the self-destruct device is all rather detailed where it needs to be and not shown most everywhere else. They used things like industrial tubing for much of the corridors and things like that, and had some dark spots where you can go around a corner and get lost, and it allowed certain things to happen. They pull some cheap tricks like Dallas accidentally knocking over a table and scaring everybody. But as I was saying, Veronica Cartwright was the person who was the person that had any common sense about it at all, and also was the one that was the most scared. You could see it in her face throughout much of the last part of the film, in that she was just this side of just jumping out a porthole somewhere. And so on the other side of that, you have Sigourney Weaver, who has put on this shell of not being affected by anything, but you can kind of see in her eyes that she doesn't know if she's going to get out of this or not. Incredible acting by her on this. Everything else is very understated. Dallas as the captain is just, they're just kind of talking like people talk. And you add in Harry Dean Stanton, who went on to win an Oscar for Paris, Texas, and Yaphet Kotto, who you saw in the, what was the crime procedural? It was Law and Order or Homicide, whatever it was. He played G, who was the precinct captain, and did, great job with that. I mean, did a great job with everything he was in. Ian Holm, who plays kind of the spy and all of this, the corporation puts him in to make sure that if anybody is doing anything like stealing from them, corporations always think you're stealing from them. So he is the kind of person that's been put in as kind of the one that they can always trust because he's programmed to do. Now, I've heard that they didn't intend for him to be a real robot. He was kind of a synthetic human. He was part human, part robot, and they did pretty well with that by using, when they cut his head off, they actually put cheap caviar, if there's such a thing, in the neck, along with some glass marbles and things like that, to make it look mechanical and organic at the same time. Interestingly, the alien, after it had fallen off John Hurt, is examined, and what they have in it looks very creepy, and it looks very real, and it really is. It's oysters. It's a great big oyster that they're prodding there, but because of the way they're photographing it and the way they're lighting it, it looks like something very alien. And I suppose if you looked at an oyster up close, it would look pretty alien. Another thing, and this is something that I found out about this, was that these sets were all closed in. Usually when you have a set, you build a background, and everything behind that is all just lights and cameras and things. And so to the actor's point of view, they have to pretend that fourth wall exists. But in the case of this, very often the fourth wall did exist. They built the sets all around the people, so they would have this claustrophobia, the idea that they've been in space for a long time, and they're 7 people that are kind of crammed together, and they either have to get along or they don't. And while they don't talk too much about relationships in this film, and I don't think they needed it, there is that undertone that here are people who've been doing this for a long time. There's not really anything that shakes them up too much. They have damage to the ship. Well, we'll fix it, but we could do it right, or we can make it work. There's a lot of matter of factness about this. They're smoking. They're having coffee. They joking with each other during meals. It's not high camaraderie. It's just, well, this is who we are. This is who we're working with. We get along. And you see a lot of that in there, and that's a lot of layering that you don't usually see in films, and especially in a lot of science fiction, especially before Star Wars and even during Star Wars. Everything is very clean. And these people are sweaty, and their hair is messed up, and they've got grease under their fingernails. They've obviously worked for a living, and the ship is not the cleanest place either. And they even have the cat. So there's one scene that bothers me in this whole thing. I mean, it's all so well done. It really is. It's so well done. There's one scene where Sigourney Weaver is getting ready to get away, and then on the comms comes the cat. And it reminds her the cat is still alive, and so she goes and gets the cat. And I always wondered how the cat was able to operate the communication system. Must have been a smart cat. But they use a lot of things that are not necessarily authentic to space travel, but work. They have water dripping. Now, it could be explained away of what it is, but some of it is condensation perhaps. But in one scene where Harry Dean Stanton stands under it and basically showers in it, washes his face with it, that was ad-libbed. But they liked it and kept it. In the case of the computer that they call Mother, it's a centralized core kind of thing. There's only one place that you can access it, and it has security protocols in it. And despite the fact that it had the spectral order of what they were supposed to do in this mission, it had some very mundane things on it as well, and that these days it would just be anywhere on the ship or everywhere on the ship, not just in one place and not in a great lighted room. That kind of took away from it, but I think it has more to do with the time that it was made, where computers were still kind of a novelty. In 1979, the Apple computer and I think the TRS-80 were the only things that were on the market that were actual computers for home. And IBM would come out after 1980 before their PC first came out, and the Macintosh somewhat after that. So what we have here is computer technology that looked futuristic in 1979, but doesn't so much anymore. Now, the monster itself was based on artwork by H.R. Giger, who had a very elaborate costume made in order to flesh out that series of drawings that he's done. They've become very famous, and he has a number of things based on this exomorph type of design. It was something that existed before the film, but they decided to adapt it for the film, and had a lot of help from H.R. Giger to put all that together. All in all, when you break it down, though, this is your standard haunted house movie. There's something in here. We're going to split up and try to find it, and it's going to kill us one by one until one person survives. And you do it by keeping it dark. You do it by keeping people at least anxious, and that all works here. And all they did was just put it in space. Now, the movie should have ended about the time that Ripley gets into the shuttle and blasts away from the ship, and the ship explodes. And all of the effects here, there were no digital effects. And so much of what we saw in, for instance, the creature exploding from John Hurt's chest was sheep intestines being thrown out and blood capsules, which were your usual theater blood sprayed everywhere. And the original alien that we saw was actually Ridley Scott's hands and surgeon gloves going like this underneath it. And the first sight of it when the pod opens up, once again, is like cow stomach. Just it's something that looks really organic because it is. And the explosion effects were actually explosions. The flashes, the circuit sizzling was done with arc lights. Much of this stuff was done on set, and it was very effective, I think. As I was saying, as Sigourney Weaver goes into the shuttle, it should have been over, but then they decided that it wasn't enough and had the alien hide in there. And so it gave the fourth act actually to the picture. And you have where Sigourney Weaver feels like she's off the hook. She's getting ready to go into the freezing chamber with the cat, and then sees it. And so then comes the last part of it where you get an actual satisfying ending where the monster is thrown out and blasted through one of the engines, which interestingly, the engines are always just lights on most sci-fi ships. But in this case, it was a light and they had water rushing through it to look like plasma. And that's how the monster gets caught in all of this. It's actually a jet of water. Just you once again, you show them something, you suggest something else, and you're convinced of it. So it was really an incredibly well-crafted film. It was incredibly well acted. It was understated. Everybody spoke quietly and matter-of-factly on everything. And it was very realistic. Nobody had any lines to say. It was all, nobody explained anything. It was just, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to kill this. Let's have dinner. This isn't our system. There's been an emergency, and that's why we woke up. We're going to take care of this. It was all very low-key acting, and there was no scenery chewing, and yet it kept you on the edge of your seat throughout the film. So if you have not seen Alien in a few years, I highly recommend it. Of course, it's on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's no doubt on one of the streaming services somewhere. So I recommend that to you. We'll be back on Tuesday with another Babylon 5, and then Deep Space Nine. And I think that I know we're going to be away for several days after that, so we will not have any videos for the next week afterwards. And then we'll be back in the second week of October with some new material for you. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, don't go far.